Alright, hi everyone. So we're talking about rigging here. So this is actually from chapter 6 rigging, and you can find the lecture slides here. Chapter 6 rigging. It's good to really go through this, you know, just read through it, just to understand the fundamentals of rigging and how you create parenting, creating group nodes and joints, and what a joint consists of, things like how do you position the joints, and also some guidelines that you need to follow to get a clean skeleton rig, which will all be explained here in this video. And for that, what you need to do is make sure you go to the labs, under lab tutorial 4 exercise files rigging, download that. This is basically a zip file. Alright, with that zip file, we're gonna open it up in Maya. This is the file that's called O2 begin, so use that file to start with. Alright, before we move on, let's talk about some basic organization stuff that you need to make sure you do on your character model. So if you see here in the outlining, you see that everything is placed under this group called group cartoon beaver, depending on the name of your character model. And underneath it, two more groups. So you have the group body, which is the mesh of your character, as well as group head, grp underscore head, which are all the appendages, things like the eyes and nose, things that connect to the head, and that is placed in its own separate group. So grouping is really powerful way to organize things, and we also have the layer editor to help us to do things like turn the visibility on and off, or probably turn it to template when we're starting to create all these joints. So that's a good thing to do as well. By now you should know how to do this. Basically, select all the mesh, and you have this button right to the far right here that in your layer editor that says create a new layer and assign selected objects. So you click that, you have this layer newly created. You can give it a try by pressing V, so that allows you to place all your objects on that mesh and turn it to template or perhaps reference, so you can't select it at all. Turn it to template doesn't allow you to select it as well, but turns it into wireframe, and that is a good feature to have as well. So I'm just gonna delete this, and let's just make sure everyone is actually, all the mesh is actually back here in this layer. So add selected objects. Alright, cool. Alright, so I'm gonna turn it to template, and you gotta make sure that you want this skeleton menu to be here that has all this create joints command, the create joints tool, and to do that, make sure you are not in modeling, you are actually in rigging. So rigging in Maya 2017, if you're using Maya 2017, the option is under rigging. You see skeleton here, create joints, and that's what we'll be using. To create joints, we need to make sure we are in side view. So I'm going to hold spacebar, hold left mouse button, and make sure I go to the right view here. So let's just zoom in a bit. I hold Control Alternate, click and drag, zoom in a bit more. Sweet. Alright, let's just start to do this now, shall we? Let's just make this a bit smaller perhaps. Go to skeleton, create joints. Sweet. Now let's just place our first joint, which is somewhere near the thigh here, and I'll say that's a good spot. Click one time to create joint 1. In Maya, you need to tell Maya, if you realize from my demo in the class, you need to tell Maya that how this leg is going to bend. So we know that the knee is somewhere here, so let's just place the knee here and create that bend like so by placing the ankle joint down here. This is quite important. Why? Because then Maya will not control how this leg is bent, so you need to tell Maya how it's supposed to bend and then bend it properly. Tell you what, I think that is not looking right, so I'll just do it again. That feels too long, so I'll place it down a bit and place it there and place it here, and that's a good one. And then we'll continue by adding more joints here for the foot and it here for the toe. Sweet. Now to commit that, you can press either enter, or I press Q, which is my selection tool. Q and enter does the same thing. So that's committed now. Right, sweet. Let's go back to perspective view, hold spacebar, and let's go to perspective. Sorry about that. Right. Now you see that the joint has been created. This joint chain has been created, and it's looking pretty much straight. It doesn't really follow our mesh here, which is, it's supposed to be that way. So why didn't I actually just do this instead? Go into perspective and just place my joints. Sorry, there, and say here, and keep on doing it. And why didn't I do this instead? It may look like I'm getting the right, my joint chain is actually following the mesh, or is it? So you'll notice that the perspective view is not the right viewport to use when you're creating all these joints. So let's just delete that, and that's not what we want. So we might start with a pretty much straight joint chain, but we know we can always tweak this. So let's just go to press W, and we can translate it. Now if you feel like this is not, it says here translate X, and whereas if I select this and press W, what I get is the blue arrow is moving. So you can just pretty quickly hold W, hold the left mouse button, go to world, and you'll see if you move this now, it is the X that you're moving. Well, it doesn't really matter, but just so that you don't get confused with it. So we're just gonna place it roughly where we think it should be, or if you want to be really precise, you can actually go to the front view and say, okay, this is where we want it to be. So I'm going to use that line to kind of orient it. Now the next thing we want to do is, we don't want to actually just rotate it like that. Yeah, we can, and it actually will follow the mesh, but you'll see that there's values here in the rotate, so we don't want that. We want that when we're creating the rig, all these values, the rotate values, is all 0. Okay, so let's just undo that, and instead of using that, we are going to go into our attribute editor, and let's just click that, or you can press Ctrl A. You'll see under the attribute editor, if you scroll down under joint here, there is an option called joint orient. Alright, so let's just move it in axis. You'll see that if I hold Control and left mouse button, I can actually rotate it without actually introducing values to my rotates. So hold Control, left mouse button, and drag, and keep on doing this until it actually aligns with our mesh here. So again, Control, click and drag. Don't let go of Control, by the way. Control, click and drag, and align it nicely there until you think that's kind of doing the job. I think it is, and I'll say that's okay. Tell you what, I'm gonna push this a bit here, because I think, yeah, this is a much nicer thing. Because later on, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna select this joint, and let's just pull it down a bit. So hold W, and I will go to, not that one, I'll go to parent, and I want to bring this down a bit so that the ankle actually is located there instead. So let me just tweak this a bit more. Yeah, that looks about correct. bit here, I guess. Yep. And select this one and bring it down a bit. Right, so this is looking kind of okay, except for these guys here. So perhaps I can do the same thing again, and let's just see. Okay, so I'm gonna keep on doing this, but you'll see the problem with this method. Okay, that's kind of doing that, so I'll just, now it can be really hard to actually decide, okay, where do I actually, you know, move this guy, because, you know, if you start to move it that way, it's starting to rotate in a funny way, so it can be hard. So we're not gonna do it this way. Instead, let me just undo that. Instead, what we are going to do is to actually select this joint, and let's just delete it for now. And we're gonna need to do it a much clever way. So before we do that, we need to zero out so there's no offset, so that, you know, this is actually following its parent here. Alright, so let's just go to object. So I want this joint to follow its parent. Right now it's not, because it's pointing that way, whereas, you know, this parent is pointing that way. So selecting this joint, we're going to zero out, hit 0 here, 0 there, 0 here as well. So this one will now actually follow its parent like so. Of course, you gotta make sure you are in object mode for that to happen. And that's pretty much okay for our purpose. Now we're going to move on to the next video, whereby we'll complete this ankle and get it right. Alright, see you in the next video.